With so many wives and concubines, Solomon fathered countless children, though the Bible names only a few. Each son represented not just a child, but a potential claimant to the throne. And each mother had her own ambition. Within the harem, whispers turned to schemes. Women vied for favor, not only for themselves, but for their sons' futures. Solomon's court became a breeding ground for succession rivalries. The question of inheritance haunted the palace. Who would rule after Solomon? Would it be the son of a full queen, or the son of a concubine with more influence? Each alliance he formed through marriage had the potential to birth a future king and a future civil war. And behind every child, a mother pushed. These weren't idle women. They used affection, manipulation, and even sorcery to secure futures for their offspring. Eunuchs served as messengers, plots were whispered in perfumed halls, and Solomon, burdened by age and divided loyalties, grew weary of the intrigue. In the end, his chosen heir was Rehoboam, the son of an Ammonite woman named Naamah. One wife, one son, one decision. But that decision would shatter the kingdom. Solomon's legacy wasn't just wisdom, it was a royal house built on fragile foundations. In the ancient world, kings displayed power not just through armies or palaces, but through women. A massive harem was a status symbol, a living monument to a ruler's prestige. The more wives and concubines a king had, the more wealth, influence, and international appeal he appeared to command. Solomon's harem wasn't just about passion, it was architecture, constructed to show the world that Israel's king could rival the pharaohs, the kings of Assyria, and even the great monarchs of Babylon. Where others built ziggurats and pyramids, Solomon amassed queens and dancers. These women came with luxurious caravans, spices from Sheba, silks from Damascus, gold from Ophir. His court glittered with splendor, and visitors were dazzled by the diversity of accents, robes, and rituals. It was as if the world itself had come to worship Solomon. But behind the lavish surface, something darker brewed. The women were sequestered, guarded, and ranked. Jealousies flared. Children were born into tangled family politics. And Solomon, stretched thin, had to manage not only a kingdom, but 1,000 private worlds, each vying for his attention. The harem was no longer a symbol of wisdom. It had become a golden cage, trapping the king within his own pride. Solomon built the Temple of the Lord, an architectural wonder, unmatched in beauty and sacredness. Gold-lined walls, cedar from Lebanon, a sanctuary for the Ark of the Covenant. Fire from heaven fell when he dedicated it. Priests trembled, the people rejoiced. It was the high point of Solomon's reign, a monument to his devotion. But only a few hills away, other altars were rising. He built them for his wives, to Chemosh of Moab, to Molech of Ammon, to Ashtoreth, the goddess of Sidon. Solomon didn't just allow these idols, he constructed the places they were worshipped. The same king who asked God for wisdom was now kneeling beside foreign gods. Jerusalem, the city of God, began to resemble a spiritual marketplace. Smoke from pagan sacrifices mingled with the incense of the temple. The sacred and the profane stood side by side, one built by obedience, the other by compromise. Solomon thought he could manage both. He couldn't. God was not impressed by the golden temple if the king's heart bowed elsewhere. The very altars he built for love would be the ones that provoked divine anger. And Solomon's great legacy was now a kingdom teetering between glory and judgment. Solomon's final years were not filled with celebration, but with silence, shadows, and sorrow. The wisest man in the world had built a kingdom so vast, so magnificent, that people traveled across continents just to hear him speak. And yet, as he aged, his heart grew heavy. His wives, once symbols of prestige and passion, had led him into spiritual ruin. The temple he built now stood surrounded by altars to foreign gods. Was he aware of what he had become? Ecclesiastes offers a haunting glimpse into his soul. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. He speaks not as a king in triumph, but as a man exhausted by pleasure, weary from indulgence. His words aren't arrogant, they're aching. I had everything, he seems to say, and none of it satisfied. He had hundreds of women, but no peace. Gold beyond measure, but no joy. Wisdom enough to rule the world, but not his own heart. The Bible does not record a dramatic repentance, only quiet disillusionment. Solomon died surrounded by wealth, wives, and shrines, but utterly alone in spirit. The kingdom he left behind was already cracking, and the son who would inherit his throne would also inherit the consequences. If Solomon's 700 wives were political tools, what then were his 300 concubines? They weren't just women of pleasure. In royal courts, concubines often served complex roles: companions, servants, entertainers, and sometimes even spies. Many were noble-born but not of high enough rank for full marriage. Others were gifts from foreign rulers, symbolic tokens of submission or goodwill. For Solomon, they filled the spaces between diplomacy and desire. These women were kept in separate quarters, guarded by eunuchs. Their days were spent in luxurious captivity, silks, perfumes, and song, awaiting a summons that might never come. And when they did enter the king's chamber, their place in the palace might rise or vanish overnight. Some bore him children, some were forgotten. But collectively, these 300 women added weight to Solomon's image as the supreme monarch. He could afford to indulge where others could not. His court shimmered with femininity, mystery, and temptation, a paradise that was slowly corroding his soul. God had warned Israel's kings not to multiply wives, lest their hearts turn away. Solomon ignored it. And with every concubine added to the roster, his heart drifted further from the God who once granted him wisdom beyond measure. Solomon ruled in a time of peace, but it came at a hidden cost. Unlike his father David, who fought wars on every border, Solomon rarely lifted a sword. His reign was marked by diplomacy, trade, and wealth. Israel became the centerpiece of the region, drawing merchants, ambassadors, and kings from afar. But peace, in Solomon's world, wasn't won with strength alone, it was purchased, and his currency was marriage. Each new wife was a promise: we won't attack you, you won't attack us. His harem grew with the number of peace treaties signed. Edom, Moab, Phoenicia, Egypt, they all had daughters in Jerusalem. Each alliance bought years without war. But peace bought through compromise has its own dangers. Solomon may have avoided bloodshed on the battlefield, but spiritual war erupted in the heart of his kingdom. Pagan altars rose beside the temple of Yahweh. Sacred groves littered the hills. Rituals foreign to Israelite law became common. His people grew wealthy, but confused. What did it mean to be God's chosen nation if their king bowed to idols? Solomon's peace wasn't free. It came with a price tag, one that would be paid by the generations that followed him. Solomon's tale is more than a historical curiosity. It's a mirror. The man who had it all, wealth, wisdom, women, power, lost what mattered most: his integrity. His harem wasn't just a symbol of glory, but of a heart fragmented by desire. His foreign wives weren't just political pawns, but spiritual turning points. Each alliance chipped away at the foundation of his faith. The tragedy? It didn't have to end this way. God had warned him, twice. Prophets spoke. The scriptures were clear. But Solomon believed he was the exception, the one who could manage temptation without falling. And in that belief, he unraveled everything he built. His life is a warning carved into history. Brilliance can be blinding, success can lead to self-deception, and unchecked desire, even in the hands of the wisest, can destroy kingdoms. Solomon's name still echoes in sermons and scrolls. His proverbs guide millions. His temple is remembered with awe. But his heart? It serves as a caution. Because in the end, the man who wrote, "Above all else, guard your heart," failed to guard his own. And the fall of a nation began not with a sword, but with a kiss. Behind every marriage was a ripple. Behind 700, a tidal wave. Solomon's wives weren't passive figures. Many were princesses, priestesses, or daughters of powerful men. They came to Jerusalem with their own gods, their own customs, and their own expectations. And slowly, they reshaped the heart of Israel, not through war, but through influence. Solomon built shrines for them, sacred groves, hilltop temples. Some of these deities, like Ashtoreth and Chemosh, demanded more than incense. They demanded blood, even child sacrifice. What began as political courtesy became spiritual corruption. Jerusalem, once the city of Yahweh, began to look like Babylon. Pagan rituals echoed near the temple. Incense to foreign gods drifted through the air. And Solomon, the son of David, the king who danced before the ark, now bowed before idols. It wasn't only Solomon who was affected. The people saw their king's compromises. Some followed, others stumbled. Israel's moral center shifted. The rot was slow, but it was spreading. These women didn't conquer Israel with swords. They conquered it with seduction, culture, and soft persuasion. And Solomon, so eager to please, became an agent of his own kingdom's decay, one marriage at a time. What kind of man marries 700 women and still needs 300 more? King Solomon, the wisest man in biblical history, wasn't just famous for his proverbs and wealth. He was infamous for his bedroom. His palace was no ordinary royal court. It was a labyrinth of silken chambers echoing with the whispers of queens, princesses, and concubines from every corner of the ancient world. But this wasn't about lust alone. Every bride was a treaty. Every kiss sealed a political alliance. From Egypt to Moab, Phoenicia to Edom, Solomon built an empire with incense, gold, and love, or at least something like it. His harem became the largest in recorded history, a symbol of power, control, and tragically, obsession. Scripture warns that his heart was turned away, that these women, with their foreign gods and foreign tongues, seduced not only his body, but his soul. The wisest man became foolish in love. But was this truly love, or a dangerous game of power and compromise? We're diving into 17 chapters of royal romance, political intrigue, spiritual downfall, and ancient scandal. Solomon's story isn't just about desire, it's about the price a man pays when power and passion collide. Solomon's first known marriage was not to an Israelite woman, but to a daughter of Pharaoh. This wasn't just a romantic gesture, it was a calculated move on the chessboard of ancient geopolitics. By marrying the Egyptian princess, Solomon wasn't merely gaining a wife, he was cementing an alliance with the most powerful empire of the day. No arrows were fired, no blood was spilled, just a wedding feast, and peace followed. This act set the tone for his future unions. Each wife represented a treaty, a truce, or a tribute. Marrying women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and Hittite lands allowed Solomon to expand Israel's influence without waging war. In the ancient Near East, marriage was foreign policy. Kings exchanged daughters like currency, and Solomon, ever the wise statesman, collected nations through nuptials. But there was a problem. These marriages brought foreign customs, idols, and gods into the heart of Jerusalem. Solomon, raised to worship Yahweh alone, now dined beside altars to Chemosh and Ashtoreth. What began as diplomacy quietly morphed into spiritual compromise. Each new wife didn't just wear a crown, she carried her homeland's gods in her dowry, and the seeds of Solomon's downfall were already being sown. At what point does desire stop being about love and become obsession? Solomon's pursuit of women didn't slow as he aged. In fact, it intensified. He collected wives and concubines the way others might gather gold or scrolls. His appetite for companionship seemed endless. But was this love, or something more hollow? The book of Ecclesiastes, believed to be written by Solomon in his later years, offers a haunting clue. "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired," he wrote. "I refused my heart no pleasure." His tone isn't triumphant, it's weary, exhausted, empty. He had everything and still felt nothing. This wasn't passion, it was compulsion. Each new woman offered a momentary thrill, a flash of novelty, but the fulfillment never lasted. So he moved on to the next, and the next, until the palace halls were crowded with voices and veils, and Solomon himself had become a ghost wandering through his own fantasies. The man who once sang of love in the Song of Songs now drowned in it, buried beneath layers of performance, power, and pretense. Solomon didn't fall in love 700 times. He fell into a pattern of using affection as a drug, and no amount was ever enough. Solomon was known for his wisdom, his judgments were legendary, his proverbs studied for generations. But wisdom is not immunity, it's only a guide, and even the wisest man can be led astray by desire dressed as diplomacy. Solomon understood people, he understood women, he knew what pleased them, what flattered them, and how to win loyalty. This made him a master negotiator, a beloved ruler, and a dangerously seductive figure. But with every new bride, the balance shifted. It wasn't just about alliances anymore. It became about indulgence. The grandeur of his court demanded beauty, entertainment, and the constant thrill of novelty. Exotic languages echoed in his halls, dancers from Tyre, singers from Arabia, perfumes from Sheba. He wasn't just ruling a kingdom, he was living in a fantasy of his own design. But wisdom without restraint turns in on itself. Solomon began building temples for the gods of his wives, not out of belief, but out of affection, or perhaps fear of offending them. He allowed worship on the Mount of Olives to gods who demanded child sacrifice. The wise king wasn't just making room for foreign influence, he was opening the door to chaos, and his heart was slowly shifting away from his God. Solomon may have sat on the throne, but he wasn't always the one pulling the strings. In a court filled with queens, concubines, and foreign princesses, influence became its own kind of power. Some women ruled quietly through affection, Others wielded charm like a dagger. Behind closed doors, pillow talk often carried more weight than royal decrees. They asked for favors, for shrines to their gods, for leniency toward their homelands, for seats of power for their sons. And Solomon, ever eager to please, too often said yes. The most powerful woman in his life may have been his Egyptian wife, the daughter of Pharaoh. He built her a palace of her own, separate, sacred, untouchable. It was a symbol. Egypt had a foothold inside Jerusalem. Each queen had her allies, eunuchs, advisors, priests. Solomon's court wasn't just politically divided, it was emotionally fractured. Decisions were made not always for the good of the kingdom, but to avoid conflict among the women who shared his bed. These women didn't wear crowns, but they shaped policies. They didn't sit in the temple, but their gods stood next to it. And as Solomon's heart drifted, so too did his control. The throne was his, but the influence belonged to many. God had been patient with Solomon. He had given him wisdom, peace, wealth, and glory, more than any king before him. He had appeared to Solomon twice, warning him to stay faithful. But Solomon, entangled in the arms and gods of his many wives, drifted further with every passing year. Then came the final line. Scripture records, "The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away." This wasn't mere disappointment, it was divine fury. The God who had made a covenant with David, who had promised an eternal dynasty, now declared judgment. He would tear the kingdom apart, not in Solomon's lifetime, for the sake of David, but in the days of Solomon's son. Enemies began to rise. Hadad of Edom, Rezon of Damascus, Jeroboam, a bold official, was told by a prophet that he would rule 10 tribes. God was setting the stage for rebellion. The kingdom that Solomon had expanded through marriage was now cracking from within. And it was no army or foreign invasion that triggered it, but the wrath of a God betrayed. The man who once stood in holy awe at the temple's dedication now watched his legacy crumble from the inside. Solomon's story didn't end with his death. It lived on, in ruins, rebellions, and regret. His son Rehoboam took the throne, but he lacked his father's tact and wisdom. The fragile unity Solomon built through political marriages shattered almost immediately. 10 of Israel's 12 tribes rebelled, forming their own kingdom. Only Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to the house of David. The empire of Solomon, so grand, so rich, so envied, lasted only a generation. What caused it to crumble? Not war, not poverty, but compromise, a heart divided. Solomon's harem, once a symbol of power, had become a monument to excess. His altars to foreign gods stood long after his body was buried. His many sons, each with a different mother, ensured the court was always ripe for civil strife. His wisdom made him famous. His lust made him fall. And his legacy serves as a timeless warning. No amount of intelligence, success, or love can substitute for faithfulness to one's core values. Solomon's tragedy wasn't his marriages, it was that he gave his heart away, one foreign bride at a time, until nothing was left for the God who gave him everything. The wisest man on earth died knowing wisdom without obedience is vanity. Long before Solomon built his palace or married his first foreign bride, a warning had been written into the very law he was sworn to uphold. In Deuteronomy 17:17, God commanded, "He shall not multiply wives for himself, or his heart will be led astray." Solomon would have known this. As king, he was expected to write a personal copy of the Torah. He read the words, he understood the risks, and yet he chose to believe he could handle it. That's the danger of wisdom without obedience. Solomon likely told himself each marriage was strategic, that he was strong enough to resist idolatry, that his intellect would keep his heart in check, but compromise came slowly. A temple built here, an altar erected there, a festival allowed just once for his Moabite queen. Eventually, the lines blurred. By the time of his old age, Solomon wasn't just tolerating foreign gods, he was worshipping them. The man who once prayed for wisdom in a dream now burned incense to Chemosh and bowed to Molech. It wasn't sudden, it was gradual erosion, and the wisest man in the world became the very thing he was warned never to be. Solomon's heart was divided, and soon so was his kingdom. The spiritual compromise that began in his private chambers would eventually spill into the political realm. His marriages weren't just personal, they were public, and the people of Israel were watching their king sacrifice to foreign gods, watching him spend lavishly on imported luxuries, watching him place love and lust above law. And with each new queen came a new faction, a new voice whispering in Solomon's ear. The unity of the kingdom began to crack. Tribes felt alienated, priests grew uneasy, prophets warned of judgment, and among Solomon's sons, born to different mothers with different loyalties, rivalry took root. The seeds of civil war were being planted not in the battlefield, but in the bedroom. By the end of Solomon's reign, dissatisfaction simmered beneath the surface. Taxes were high, labor was forced, resentment grew in the northern tribes, and after Solomon's death, it would all come to a head. Israel would split, 10 tribes breaking away from the house of David. A divided heart led to a divided people, and the consequences of Solomon's marriages would echo long after his golden crown was laid to rest.